Hello everyone, this is Wonki. I'm a classical saxophonist and assistant professor of saxophone at Montana State University. Today, I'd like to discuss how to interpret music using Ferling Etude number 31, since many of you are working on Ferling Etudes for your auditions. I will introduce 3 big steps and get into Ferling Etude to show you how I construct the musical interpretations. I want to let you know that this video is going to be quite technical and very specific, since I'm going to use terminologies of music theory. But I will try my best to simplify the ideas so that it's going to be easier for you to be able to understand it. So please try to watch it until the very end. There are 3 main steps in constructing your own interpretations. Number 1, understand the historical background. You want to get to know about the composer and the piece as much as you can. So this requires some research about the composer and about the work. You want to know where the composer is from, in what time period, which gives a really clear clue into what kind of style of music the composer is writing. Is there any specific meaning to the work? Is this absolute music or is this program music? All these important information will help us and guide us to create a more objective interpretation. Number 2, analyze the work and understand the musical structure. So you want to go through the music with your knowledge of a music theory and try to analyze it. Now, what is the structure of the music? What kind of musical techniques are used? Is there any specific meaning to the work? Is this absolute music or program music? How does a theme develop? And what is the specific style and period of this music? The purpose of analysis is to support your interpretations with much more objective point of view using historical and theoretical analysis. So we're using evidence, facts backed up by history and theory. And this is very important to be able to create more persuasive interpretations. However, I still believe that there are many things in music that word cannot describe. And this is an important part of interpretation to maintain a fantasy. If you feel something is absolutely right in a certain way, but you cannot explain it more historical, theoretical ways, that's okay. I think we should pursue it and maintain it. So which brings back to the last point, number 3. Combine your own personal feeling and taste. Why is this music important to you? What resonates? What kind of tone color do you want to use? And what kind of vibrato you want to use in a certain piece or certain situations? All of these comes from your personal feelings. And I think chances are you're right. We want to maintain your own ideas, your own characteristics. Once you understand historical and theoretical backgrounds of the music, it's safe to say that you could add your own personal taste. So let's talk about the Ferling Etude number 31 and try to show you how I construct my own interpretations. We want to start from big picture. Who is the composer? The full name of composer is Franz Wilhelm Ferling, and he's a German romantic composer who played oboe and clarinet. And he composed this etude for oboist. Later, saxophone professor from Paris Conservatory, Marcel Mule, adopted this etude. And since then, pretty much all saxophonists study the Ferling Etude as well. And I can honestly say that this is probably the most important etude for myself. I practice every day and as much as I can because there are so many things that you can learn from this etude. Now, specific piece, this is number 31. The title is Adagio Pietoso. So obviously you know what adagio is. It's a tempo. It means slowly. But the pietoso is the Italian word for pity, compassionate, merciful, and sympathetic. So already it gives you an idea. We have a German romantic composer writing a slow piece that has a quality of pity. So I would guess already that it's not going to be a happy piece. It's going to be slow, darker piece of work. So already the historical evidences will give you a musical quality to help you out. What is the key signature? So there are 4 sharps, and they start from C sharp and ends on C sharp. So this is a C sharp minor. And if we start from C sharp minor, we already know in the secondary key is going to be the relative major, which is E major. So musically, we can project that it's going to start from C sharp minor and somewhere in the middle going to E major and finally come back to the C sharp minor. Now, what about the style of music? So the style of music is definitely romantic, but if you understand the phrasings and harmonic progressions, it's very classical. So in a minute, we're going to get into a detail of a phrasing, but very symmetrical and very clear, which helps us to practice and understand the phraseology of these music. Now, if you look into the structure of the music, mainly this is ABA, ternary structure, meaning there are 3 sections. A section is comprised of C sharp minor tonality, but in the B section, the music goes into E major briefly and comes back to the C sharp minor, but it also goes into a little bit into F sharp major and minor sonority. So the harmonically is slightly ambiguous. But after B section at measure 29, we come back to A section again. And at the very end, 4 measures is codetta, meaning it's a little ending to balance the piece, because A section, the first A section has 8 measures. So you want to make sure to balance, as a composer's point of view, that second A section is also proportionally together. So that's the role of codetta at the very end. But we as a saxophonist can tune each note slightly differently so that we produce much more in tune just intonation. So if you look into the just intonation, so the first chord, we have C sharp minor triad, C sharp, E, G sharp. Based on the equal temperament, the third, which is E, needs to be sharper by 16 cents. And even the fifth, which is G sharp, needs to be 2 cents sharper. That means there's no point for you really to just work with tuner in equal temperament and perform the music, because that's not in tune and that's not reflecting the color of each tonality. But also there's no point really for you to know the 60 cents and 2 cents sharpness, because we can't really measure that when you're performing. So should we practice? I recommend you using one of the application on your tuner, and I use tonal energy. Now tonal energy has this wonderful feature where you could sustain each pitch based on the just intonation or equal temperament. But in this case, I want to use just intonation, and we want to play the C sharp and sustain it. And so there's the drone of C sharp, and using your ear, you're going to tune the third and fifth by yourself. So this is how it goes. Now you need to use your ear to see if there is the less wave when you play each note. Ideally, we want to make sure there is no crash of the waving. We want to hear kind of perfect sonority. And try to experiment by changing your embouchure, by moving your oral cavity, and maybe if you're not sure, you could relax the embouchure or tighten the embouchure to see which way is better and correct. But really, this is for us to train our ear and remembering the physiology of each tuning, so that we could articulate the third and fifth with just intonation. Now I want to talk a little bit about the tendencies of my instrument. So for me, the middle E with octave tends to be very sharp, so I always need to bring it down the pitch. In this case, middle E needs to be 16 cents sharp. So that actually helps us. I don't really need to over adjust the middle E. I could play almost naturally to be more in tune. But the high G sharp is always too sharp, so I have to make sure to bring the pitch down, and then hopefully that's going to be the right balance. Let's try it one more time. Now once you get used to it, you're ready to go. And by mapping your own physiology and how to tune will really change the mood of the music. So this is going to be a very powerful practice for you to be able to do. Now things change in major triad. In the major triad, let's start with E, G sharp, B. So the G sharp is going to be 14 cents flat. Now remember, in C sharp minor for the G sharp, which is the fifth, need to be sharper. In this case, it needs to be flatter, almost 16 cents different. That means depending on harmony, the same G sharp cannot be in the same tuning. So this is why it's so important to train our ear and to be able to tune differently in each situation. So the third G sharp needs to be 14 cents flat, but the B, which is fifth, need to be 2 cents sharp. So let's try E major. This way, the G sharp is very tricky because third in any major triad or minor triads are always tricky. But this is a way to train yourself and use your ear in any given tonality. Going back to the Ferling Etude, at the beginning, if you take a look, there are 4 measure small phrasing and another 4 measure. In total, 8 measure is a big phrasing. But you want to make sure to create the direction of the phrase, which is 4 measure. So try not to fragment the ideas, but try to connect the 4 measures without vibrato. That's one idea. Now, I forgot to talk about the C sharp fingering. So there are many ways to play C sharp, and we all know the C sharp is very difficult to tune. For me, I'm using the octave 3 and 5 for the C sharp. It gives a little bit noisier approach, but it gives me a warmer taste to the tone and brings me in tune right away. So I'm using that fingering for this C sharp. Now, if you take a look at the third measure, you have B sharp. Now B sharp is a leading tone in a C sharp minor. So that really has very strong cadential effect, and which it falls into the downbeat. So I think that's going to be more of the climax of this phrasing. So I try to express that even more. Hope you can hear the difference. And then next phrase, you have accents on low C sharp and high C sharp. And treatment of accents in this piece, because we're in a romantic era, and this piece is pietoso, pity. So I don't think it's going to be more aggressive accents, but I think it's going to be more kind of a heavier tenuto accent. Okay, it's like a sigh. It's a sad, heavy quality. And that's what I'm aiming for. Compare that to more kind of aggressive accent. I think it's out of style, and I don't think nobody's gonna ever perform like this, but just want to show you the difference between the idea of accents. At 7, we have a conditional moment. We have secondary dominant resolve into the dominant and tonic in measure 8. So we'll really make sure to give a sense of ending right here. Which concludes the A section. Then moving on to B section. Now B section starts off with the same idea from A section, but quickly it's going to move into E major sonority. And you're going to see that in measure 11 to 12. Do you see how music brightens up because we moved into E major sonority? But here at measure 13 and 14, you could kind of see the genius of Ferling. So if we really want it to be E major, we should have taken out any accidentals and play E major scale like this. But Ferling decided not to do that because that's too happy. And this is a pity, sorrow, kind of a darker quality. So he maintained the leading tone of C sharp minor, which is B sharp, to kind of ground the listener to the minor side of the world, while in accompaniment still giving the E major sonority, which brings to this unique quality of a major and minor quality. And I hope you could enjoy the expressivity of these passages. And this is not just 30-second notes, this is not just running notes, but there's expression to it. So I think you could add a little bit more emotion to it as well. Then in the next measure, right away, composer decided to give you a strong beat leading tone, B sharp, to signal us that we are seriously going back to the C sharp. Now, since that's a very important note, theoretically speaking, I would like to add a little more expression on B sharp. So expression equals, for me, vibrato. So I'm going to add a little more vibrato on that note. And now we're safely back to C sharp. And then C sharp sonority continues. Then suddenly, surprise happens. We thought we were in a C sharp, but then composer decided to give you a secondary dominant of subdominant, which is 4 chord. So instead of going with the same key, he decided to go with D natural. Now D natural and chord there gives fully diminished quality. Needs to be resolved into the next measure to the F sharp. Now F sharp is a subdominant in C sharp minor, so we are still related keys, but that's a surprise to have this very dissonant, fully diminished chord. So you want to kind of express more pain in this. And something special happens at measure 28 and 29. Now, for the Marcel Mule version, there is a tight notes on 28 and the 29 on C sharp. And I like that approach because at 28, we are still in a subdominant, secondary dominant of F sharp sonority. That's what we have. But then composer decided to resolve into C sharp triad smoothly. In measure 28, the C sharp serves as fifths of the chord. Again, fifths need to be a little sharper in both major and minor. But then in measure 29, it goes back to the root because we are now in C sharp minor triad. So we need to do something. It's not the same notes. There's two ways to go about it. Either you could change the pitch or you could change the color of C sharp. And how do we change the color? I think vibrato is a very useful skill. Now here, I'm going to do vibrato on 28 with more clearly. And I'm going to tighten my embouchure so that it keeps a little bit higher side of the pitch. Then as you go into the 29, I'm going to reduce the amount of vibrato and relax my embouchure to signal that we are in C sharp minor sonority. So I hope you could hear it. Let's try it. Hope you could hear the change of color. And some people can do it probably by feeling it, by having a wonderful sense of a musicality. But also it's nice to have a theoretical analysis and backup based on the facts that you are actually doing this with analysis, so that it's not just your opinion. And I think that's very important to have a very persuasive interpretations, and it helps me as a player that I'm doing this interpretation with confidence. So this is, I think, is a very special moment. After that, we are now safely in C sharp minor, so we want to kind of give a stability and sense of groundness in here. Now, the low C sharp, low D sharp is very difficult to pronounce in piano. So here's a little technique, a little trick that I want to introduce to you. When you're playing first A, last four measures, A, I want to add D sharp. Prepare the fingering for your right hand. Okay, now for me, D sharp on my instrument is very flat, so I always need to raise the pitch by adding C sharp key. I keep the C sharp fingerings for G sharp, but once you play the G sharp, I'm preparing for low C, so I'm closing the low C key. talk about the usage of a vibrato because I didn't really use the vibrato to show you the phrasings and ideas of this music. But vibrato is a very powerful tool, and here you want to use many different kind of vibrato. Personally, I like to use a little more smaller and faster vibrato at the beginning, not too expressive, but to add the color. And then when music grows in the B section in E major, I'll add a little more colorful vibrato, a little bit wider, a little bit more audible, shall I say. And then when I go back to the C sharp's sonority, I'm going to reduce the amount of vibrato to express the difference between a minor and major sonority. And these are the things I'm thinking when I'm approaching these kind of music and any music. I'm trying to think what would be the best color, what would be the best approach to create the mood and express the idea of the composer. And I try to support these ideas with historical background, but mainly using the music theory. And this has been a very, very helpful tool to be able to construct my own interpretation. So I recommend you, if you're music majors, please make sure to take music theory and take that seriously. It's going to give you a tremendous strength in musical performance as well. So I want to show you how all these discussions come to a fruition. So I'm going to play through the whole piece, and hopefully it makes sense to you, and hopefully it's going to help you to create your own interpretations as well.